Muy buenas tardes. Sean todos bienvenidos al Movimiento Positivo de la Muerte. Estaremos conversando junto a importantes invitados acerca de la vida, el duelo y de la oportunidad de quitar a la muerte de todos los prejuicios. Movimiento Positivo de la Muerte. Dejamos con ustedes a su fundador, Simón Engel.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos nuevamente a un capítulo del podcast del Movimiento Positivo de la Muerte. Hoy ya estamos en el capítulo número 18 y estoy realmente muy contento y muy honrado de tener hoy día a un invitado maravilloso que se llama Peter Russell. Él es de Inglaterra, pero vive en Estados Unidos y a lo largo de su camino se ha especializado en el tema de aprender a soltar. Y él habla del arte de aprender a soltar. Que a mí me parece que está en el centro y en las enseñanzas más importantes que la muerte tiene para traernos, así que espero que lo que vamos a conversar hoy día les ayude mucho en su proceso y ojalá podamos llegar a sus corazones y ayudarlos un poquito a entender de qué se trata esto de soltar, que a veces parece tan simple y tan difícil a la vez. So, hi Peter.
Hi.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to have you in our podcast. Thank you so much for the gift of your time. And I hope, as I told you before start the recording, we can help many people in their grief process and in their life process to understand a little bit what is this letting go, what it's about. Something that we always hear about, and sometimes it seems very easy and very hard at the same time. So I think it will be a great help for all our community. So thanks again for being here. As I have told you in my emails, we are the Death Positive Movement in Chile, and we are trying to expand this to this community to the rest of Latin America and hopefully Spain too. And our aim is to resignify, I don't know if that is the good word in English, resignify death and dying, centering this on the profound and spiritual teachings that death has to teach us, so we can have a meaningful and more mindful and connected lives. And as I told you before, I think letting go is at the very center of these teachings. So nevertheless, you told me you are not an expert at the matter of death and dying. I think you have a great knowledge and you have much to say and to help our community in this, to deal with their grief, their loss, and to see this from another point of view.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy to explore with you. Yes. Where do you want to start?
Before we go deeper in the letting go conversation, I would like to know a little more about you. I would like you to tell us a bit about your spiritual journey and how did you end here with us talking about these matters.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it was a bit of a surprise to me. I initially, as in my teenage years, I completely rejected religion. It was just a load of weird 1,000-year-old mumbo jumbo that had no relevance to life today. I was a budding mathematician. I moved into theoretical physics and completely rejected religion. And then I began to see that science was never going to tell me anything about consciousness. Science, it's paradoxical. Science prides itself on its ability to predict. If you have a scientific theory, what does it predict? And that's how you test it. But there is nothing in physics, chemistry, biology, anything that predicts that any of us should be conscious, should be having a conscious experience. We should just be biological robots. but we're not. The one thing we actually know for sure is that we are conscious. And so this caused me to think, well, hang on, there's something missing here. So I moved into neuroscience, studying the brain, but nobody was interested in consciousness. I learned a lot about memory and neurons and all that stuff.
What year approximately are we talking about?
We're talking about here this is probably my early 20s, 20, 21, 22. No, yeah, 22, that sort of age. And then I realized the way you study consciousness is not putting electrodes on the brain, but you go within yourself. Consciousness is a subjective internal experience. So we study consciousness by looking at our own mind. And I realized the people who were doing this were not the scientists. They were the monks, the spiritual adepts, the yogis, who would sit quietly and observe their own minds. And so that led me into meditation. And I went out to India. I was studying meditation there and Eastern philosophy. And then I had this realization that there was something to spirituality after all. All the religions, they're so different and they could, argue which one is right and fight over it. But I've realized underneath, they were all saying the same thing. And that is that we limit ourselves because we are caught in self-centered, materialistic mindsets. And in one way or another, they were each teaching how to let go of that and become more our true self, and talking about the mental ease, the peace of mind, the whatever it was that came from doing that. And so that sort of became a theme of my life, really looking into what is that essential teaching that's behind all the great spiritual traditions, and how can I frame that in contemporary language and words and examples, because we live in a rational age. We don't believe in mythology so much, but basically we believe in the age of reason. So how can I make this reasonable, logical, understandable? So that's been a sort of underlying part of my journey ever since, is distilling what this essential wisdom is and finding ways to express it in terms appropriate to today.
So great journey. And did you quit all the science stuff?
Yes.
Or you make like a union, a complement? No, not a complement, like a marriage.
Yes. Not in my work life. I left that behind. I became a writer, teacher, lecturer, that sort of thing, on the ideas that interested me. But I still keep a personal interest in science. I keep reading, but I love catching up with what's happening in the frontiers of science. I find that fascinating. So my interest in science is still there, but I'm not a practicing scientist.
Thank you for that little experience about your life. So as you say, the call to let go lies at the hearts of the world's spiritual traditions. That was about what we are talking, and non-attachment to the outcomes, or surrendering to desires, or accepting the present, opening to higher powers, relinquishing the ego, forgiveness. You say they all entail letting go.
Yes, in some way or another. So, whether it's letting go of ego, I think we all have an idea what that's about. Forgiveness is really letting go of our judgments we have of other people, or, we're letting go of our own personal needs, surrendering to higher power. But it comes up again and again and again, the idea, even if it's not put in those words, it may be surrender, different language, but that basic idea is there throughout. And that to me seems, one of the key parts of all these different traditions in one way or another.
But letting go is not always an easy thing, especially when it comes to grief and loss.
Right.
So how can you help people of our community who are grieving, who are experiencing a recent loss, to gain more knowledge about this letting go?
Right. Yes. We often think of letting go as I've got to get rid of something or be free of something. So if you're grieving about something, it's like, I want to get rid of this experience because it's not pleasant. I don't like this experience. I want to get rid of it. Or if it's, anger at somebody or something, I want to get rid of this experience, whatever it is. I want to be free of it. And that motivation to want to be free of it is fine. The motivation's fine. But then that leads us to do things like suppress it. We try not to feel it. We push it to the back of our mind, to the edge of our consciousness. But I think we all know when we do that, when we push something away to the edge of our mind, it may not be consciously influencing us in our life, but it's there in the background and it still has a strong hold on us in many ways. I think it was Carl Jung who said, what you resist persists. Yeah. Meaning what you don't let into your mind, don't let into your consciousness, it stays locked in underneath and keeps controlling you. So what I suggest is the opposite from the sort of what we tend to do without thinking, which is, getting rid of it, pushing away. I suggest doing the opposite, which is actually opening up to the experience. Well, first of all, opening up to the actual holding on. I use the example, if you're holding on to a small rock, a stone, and you want to, someone says, let it go. What happens is you feel the tension in your muscles, you feel the tension in your hand. Yeah. And when you notice that, then you can release the grip the hand is having. It's the same, I think, with the mind. We, first of all, need to experience the grip the mind is having. And that's what our attachment is. And our attachment is the mind gripping onto some idea, some experience, whatever it is. So the first thing I suggest is noticing how, what's the tension there? When we're holding on, there's this mental grip. There's always some tension, which we can feel in the body or the mind. And just to, first of all, just notice that. It's like, oh, yes, I can feel, I'm uptight, to use, everyday language. I'm feeling uptight. How's that feel in the body? What's it like? What's it feel like in the body? And you can sort of feel that thing. Or what's it like in your mind? It's like, oh, there's this sort of mental tension. And that begins to open us up to what is going on. And so then I suggest we let in the actual feeling that's there. But
whatever it is.
Whatever it is. And by feeling, I mean feeling in the body. It's interesting. We use the word feeling both for an emotion, I'm feeling sad, and for the body, I'm feeling hot, I'm feeling, a prick or whatever it is. So that's the first thing we do is come to the body and notice what's going on. Different things for different emotions, or whatever it is. So that means just being interested, being curious about what's there. It's not just if you're feeling, say you're feeling angry at somebody, instead of just saying, oh yes, I've got, clenched teeth or my fists are tight or something. Say yes, but then go deeper with a sort of open curiosity. It's like, what else is going on? What else is happening here? And just being curious, being interested. And as you do that, you begin to let in all the bodily things that are going on with respect to that particular emotion. And as you do, you're letting go of the resistance. This is part of what holds things in place. As Jung said, what you resist persists. By opening up to it, you're letting go of the resistance to it. And often you'll find it just begins to soften a bit, to decrease a bit.
Yeah, because we often think that if we open to that, we will suffer more, but it's the contrary.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. We think, well, if I open up to my grief or sadness, I'm going to burst out crying in public, and don't want that. Or, with anger, if I open up to my anger, I'm going to go and hit somebody.
Or even more, I won't survive the pain or the feelings. It's too much for me.
Yes. Yes. And what usually happens is, well, the first, when you do open up to it, it can get stronger. It can feel stronger because we have been pushing it away. So when we open up to it, it feels stronger. But it's a curious thing. It may actually be less painful or less suffering. There's a saying you may have heard of that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Yeah.
And what that points to is, well, when we have a pain, the suffering comes from our resistance to the pain. So we're having some pain and we don't like it. Pain is uncomfortable, whatever it is, physical or emotional. And so we don't want to experience it. We push it away. We resist it. And that's the suffering. It's like, I'm feeling pain and I don't like the pain. So that comes from resistance. When we actually open up to it, we may notice the pain more clearly, but actually the suffering is decreasing because we're more open to it. We're accepting it. And so acceptance is the second part. The first part is letting it in. And then I say the second part is letting it be, which is acceptance, not saying, okay, I need to do this to change my body. It's like, okay, I've discovered what's going on in my body. Just allow it to be. And that's
not trying to change it or control it.
Exactly. Not trying to change it or control it, just allowing it to be as it is. And then there's a whole other side of this, that with any emotion, there's what's going on in the body, the feeling in the body, and there's what's going on in your mind. There's some narrative, some story, something you are telling yourself about what is going on. And so the second thing is to look at that, to let that in, to let in the story, to see, what am I actually telling myself here? If you're angry, you might be telling yourself, oh, this person was a stupid person for doing this, and you then go on about how awful they are. But as you let the story in, you can begin to say, well, maybe there's some truth there, but also, what have I added to it? How am I judging them, etc.?
There's always another truth.
Yes, and there's always another way of seeing things. And so, you can start putting yourself in other people's shoes and thinking, what was going on with them? What were they feeling? Did they have a bad night? Is it something that happened to them in the past that's been triggered? So you can begin to understand the other person. And just again, as you do that, as you you let in what you're telling yourself, the story, and just allowing it to be and seeing it for what it is, that again helps the whole thing soften and decrease. So that's the basic idea. And with our fear of death and things like that, or grieving, these things go very deep, and it's not an instant solution, but I find it allows one to just to start becoming more relaxed about it. And the more relaxed about it we can become, I think the better we are able to dig deeper and begin to see what's going on. And so it's a gradual relieving of the tension that's there.
How can we make this more like a practice, a daily practice? How can I tell my teenage son he can do this and it's not that hard?
Right.
How can we start?
I think you start in baby steps, tiny steps, very simple things, like in terms of the physical side, the feelings, just to encourage people to pause from time to time in the day and just notice, is there any tension there I haven't noticed? Just to ask yourself that question. Is there any tension in my body, in my being, in my mind? Is there any background tension? And just noticing it. And often when you do, you then begin to realize, oh, I'm worried about this, or I'm uptight about this. You begin to see things, but just not, to begin with, not to go deep, but just to pause and say, is there any tension? in there, and just to look in a completely open, interested way. And the second thing is, in terms of the thinking, what I suggest to people is just to pause in the day, or when you're between tasks, say between, doing your emails and making a cup of coffee or whatever it is, just to pause your thinking, just to notice how, whatever it is you're thinking, probably the next thing you've got to do or something, just to pause the thinking for a moment, just for a few seconds, just to say, okay, let me just stop that thought, not go there anymore. It'll come back, but just in that moment, just to notice how it feels when you pause your thinking. And what you'll generally find is, well, two things. One, there's a sense of relief, relaxation. It's like, yes, that feels nice to pause that particular thought. But also you come back to the present. In a way, the present reveals itself, because when you're caught up in your thinking, your attention is on whatever the thought is about, which is taking us out of the present moment. When you pause your thinking, you think, there's the sound of the wind in the trees, or there's the traffic outside I hadn't noticed, or whatever it is. There's this feeling in my body or something. The present reveals itself to you again. And so these are just two very basic practices you just do for a few seconds. I actually leave notes around the house to remind me. I have little notes saying pause, and right now there's one on the staircase leading up to this room, there's one on my back door, but I have to move them around because after 2 or 3 days I don't see them anymore. You habituate to things, and
you get used to them. Yeah,
you get used to them. So I move them somewhere new, and then when I notice,
that's the question. How do we don't get used to everything, to breathing, to life?
Yes, I think this is where we can be of help to each other as well. We can, if you're, with the example of your son, you could just say now and again, just pause, notice if there's any tension. We can encourage each other, or just pause your thinking for, and he could do the same for you. It starts becoming a little game. So I think helping each other do this, reminding each other is really important.
That is why we think death is so important, because we think she is the main reminder for all of us to be here, to don't get used to the wonder of life.
Right. Yes. It's interesting. I did a while back, I really spent some time contemplating death from my own point of view. I was looking at, what it meant to be to me, what my ideas are about, what my fears are about, and just a sort of deep contemplation of it. I just felt it was time I just contemplated death, because so many teachings say, we need to really, really contemplate death, and come to an acceptance is where freedom comes. And the conclusion of all this, I remember what I wrote down, the conclusion of it all was live life.
Exactly.
Live life. And all my concern about death and all the different things about it were actually taking me away from living life. And
that is the key.
Yeah. Yes.
Why you spoke about how we cling to things, how we hold on. Why do you think we are holding on like that all the time to every situation?
I think what we want deep down behind everything we do, we're looking to feel better. Whether we're looking to be happier, more at peace, whatever it is, more content. We ask people, what do you want? And they say, I want a vacation. Okay, why do you want a vacation? Well, I need some rest. I need some relaxation. I want to change. Why do you want that? Why do you want that? It comes down to, in the end, I want to feel better in some way or another. We're looking for a better state of mind. That's our real bottom line, is a better state of mind.
Yeah.
And that's universal. I think it was the Dalai Lama said, what is it? He said, in the final analysis, the hope of every person is simply peace of mind. And that's where all our worry takes us. We're worrying about how we can be happier. And in fact, most of us, we can be so busy worrying about whether we're going to be happy in the future that we're so busy worrying we can't be happy in the present moment. So what happens is that's what we want. And then our society tells us, if you're not happy, do something, get something. So we become consumers or whatever it is. We do things, get things underneath looking to be happy. And then we become attached to the ways we think will work to become happy. So we become attached to whatever it is, some interest, some relationship, anything at all, some job, some belief, like this is what's going to make me happy. And that's where the attachment comes. It comes from that belief. And there may be good reason for it. You find that if when you've done something in the past, you did feel better. Say, I'm trying to take the example of, you buy a new piece of clothing, new jacket or something, and you feel better for it for a very short while.
Yeah.
It soon wears off, long before the jacket's worn out. The feeling wears off. And so you think, oh, I need to buy myself another piece of clothing. I need to buy, we end up with a closet full of clothing.
We even satisfy that desire just by making a click in a virtual button, and we don't have the jacket, but we already we are less anxious when we press the button, but we don't even have the jacket.
Right, and that's
paradox.
It's really interesting, because what that shows is it isn't actually getting the jacket that makes us happy. We think buying the jacket made me happy. What's actually going on when you look more deeply is we create a discontent in ourselves. We say, I can't be happy till I have that jacket, or whatever it is. So we are creating discontent. And then when we press the buy now button on the internet, whatever it is, we haven't got the jacket. It's going to be several days before it arrives. And even then we may not like the color or something. We haven't got it, but we've relieved that discontent. It's like the discontent was, I must get this jacket. When we press buy now, the discontent goes, but the lack has gone in our mind. And so we feel better. So it isn't the jacket that's made us feel better. What we've actually done is stopped ourselves feeling unhappy about something, which is the reverse of what we think. And yet, we go through life, just chasing one thing after another, which we think will make us happy. I say they do bring some temporary satisfaction, but nothing lasts. And I think what all the great spiritual teachings are saying underneath is, we are in our own essence content, happy, at peace, but it gets covered up, overshadowed by the fact we are so busy looking how to be at peace in the world out there, how to be happy in the world. We actually cover up our natural state of peace. So that's why letting go, I think, is so important. We're letting go of our attachment to how things should be for us to be happy. And when we let go of the attachment, that's why it feels a relief. We feel at ease because we are coming back closer to our own natural being.
That's a very interesting approach, letting go of how things should be. I think that's the main the main thing. But if death is the only certain thing we have in life, why we have made up this story, thinking that death won't come, and making our minds like fooling ourselves with the story and living a life with no meanings. Why?
Right. Yeah. This is. I mean, the really interesting key question in a way, because it's paradoxical. We all know we're going to die. You know, on one level, on the intellectual level, we all know that. You know, there may be one or two people who think they're going to live forever, but but most of us, we know we are going to die. There is no doubt, and yet, you know, we live as if we're not going to die, and we don't want to accept the fact that that's going to happen. And I think there's many reasons for this, but I think part of it is what we call the ego, which is a part of our thinking, which is there to protect us, to help us survive, to live in the world. So what we call, I mean, there's different uses of the word ego, but the one I'm talking about is it's a way of thinking that is there to keep us safe. Its basic job is to help the body survive, to keep the body healthy, safe, free of danger. So that's its job.
It's an interesting approach, because I have always heard we have to let go of ego, but you are saying we should see ego as a partner, like someone who is trying to help. It's not a bad thing.
Exactly. I call the ego an ally. It's there, it's trying to help us. However, it gets triggered lots of times when it's not needed. It is certainly helpful if you are in a life-threatening situation or some other danger, there's something that needs fixing in your environment. The ego is really important. Its job is to help us survive, and in some situations, we'd be dead without it. So it's very valuable. What happens is
there's a very thin line.
Yeah.
Between when I think now we are we have confused this helping partner and with the times when it triggers with no reason.
Exactly. And so probably 9 out of 10 times it's no reason, it's unnecessary, and it gets in our way. So we get caught up in egoic thinking. So it gets in the way.
We give ego that power? Why?
Because it's insistent. Its voice needs to be insistent, because if you're walking across the street and there's a bus coming at you, the ego mind wants to say, get out the way, quick, run, do this, whatever. That's its job, is to keep us safe. It has to be insistent. And so when it's triggered by some other thing, like some conversation you're having where you're triggered by a person and you feel, I've got to tell them they're wrong, I've got to tell them what is right, that insistency comes up, and that's its job, is to urge you to do things. And so we get carried away by its insistency. It's like it says, I must do this, I must do that, whatever it is. And so that's why it becomes so strong. But the letting go of ego, which again comes up in just about every tradition or philosophy, psychology, we think of letting go of ego as, I've got to banish this, I've got to overcome it, I've got to stop it, whatever it is. It's like it's the enemy. I've got to get rid of the enemy. But if you see it as a mode of thinking that we get caught in from time to time, then it's a different approach. It's saying, okay, what I need to do here is step out of this particular way of thinking. And again, it coming back to pausing the thinking. If I notice I'm caught up in some egocentric thinking about something that needs to happen, or I must do, or whatever, we actually have the freedom, the real freedom, to choose not to follow that thought anymore. It may come back, but in that moment, we can step out of the ego mind. So it's not a question of banishing it or conquering it, but recognizing we have the freedom not to follow that way of thought for a while. So that leads to a whole different approach of letting go of ego. It's not getting rid of ego, but it's learning
It's
how.
again your invitation to let it in and let it be.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yes, it's about letting in the thinking, noticing what's going on, not trying to change it, but just like deciding, I'm not going to follow you anymore for this moment. I'm not going to follow you. And again, you start coming back to the present when you do that, and you feel easier because the ego's always creating tension. I mean, one of the ways I think we can recognize when we're caught in ego is there a mental tension there? Because it's nearly always got some sort of quality of tension to it, either just because it's a real focusing of the attention, or just because what it's focusing on are sort of thoughts of worry and concern, which create tension. Yeah. And I think
please.
So I think, coming back to, our own death, it's the ego that is scared, because the ego's job is to help us survive. And so death is a real concern for the ego mind. That would mean the end of the end of its job. And that's where I think that we all accept intellectually that we're going to die sometime, who knows when, for most of us, but the ego doesn't want to accept it. The ego mind doesn't want to accept it, because it's also the ego mind gets attached to its identity in the world. It gets attached to how people see me, what I'm doing in the world, what I want. So the ego mind is very identified with how this body, Peter Russell, is getting on in the world. It's there to help this body survive. And it gets very attached to that. And death, to the ego mind, signifies an end to all that identity. It's an end to this thing called Peter Russell. It's an end to, my identity with being an author or whatever it is. All that I identify with, all that the ego identifies with, is coming to an end. So the ego mind that is really scared or fearful of death.
So could you please deepen a little more about this identity, this little identity that we create to survive in this world, but
yes,
we are much more than that? Can
you
talk about that?
Yes. If you ask most people, who are you? That question, it's sometimes used in some sort of meditations, who am I? If you ask people that, what they come up with is all the surface stuff like me, Peter Russell, British author, blah. And then you go deeper, I am whatever it is. I am humorous, but also I can be this. We go into our personality, and and we go into our history. I studied theoretical physics. All of this stuff, is our identity. And it's even deeper than that. I believe in whatever it is I believe in, whether it's, political, scientific, religious, social. It goes deep. And so there's this whole identity built up of who I am in the world, But what the question is really pointing to is not who you are in the world. It's pointing to something deeper, which is, what do you mean by I? What do you mean by I? The I that, the I that is experiencing this moment right now.
And what do you mean by in the world? Because lots of us think the world is this tiny box we live in,
right?
And it's completely related with that true I that you are talking about.
Right.
It's much bigger, much.
Right.
We don't have the intellect only to understand that.
We live in a tiny portion of reality. Tiny.
Yeah.
First of all, the senses only see part of reality, and then we filter it ourselves. So we live in this tiny bit of reality. But then, what they're pointing to is, what is the word I? When I use the word, I am, seeing you now. What is the I that is seeing you? That's not the ego identity. Well, it could be, well, the I that is seeing you is Peter Russell, but that's just the surface stuff. It's really pointing to this fact that there's this sense of being, this sense of I am, not I am anything, but just I am. And that is there our whole life. That sense of me, that deep sense of me that is knowing this moment, is the same sense of me that was there yesterday, 10 years ago, back as far as I can remember in my life. This sense of I-ness, this deep sense of I am, hasn't changed. My beliefs, my body has changed. I could change my name. Any of that could change. But that sense of I am is always there. And so that's what they're pointing to. And that's what I think a lot of the spiritual traditions are pointing to, is the need to recognize this deeper sense of I am. And it's, people think, I know when I started reading about this, I started reading Indian philosophy and things, I thought, oh, there's this thing called the true self, the pure self. And if I really, meditate, then maybe after years, I will have this amazing experience of the true self. And we build it up like some ecstatic experience.
Yeah.
But then over time, I just realized, no, it's always there. It's nothing extraordinary whatsoever. It's there. It is so familiar. But because our attention is directed out into the world, or even when our attention is absorbed by a thought, it's still directed out into the world of things through thought. When we step back from that, then we just have to think, oh yes, here I am. I've always been here. So it's not about discovering something new. It's actually about recognizing something that's always there. But because it's so quiet, it's so still, we don't notice it. It's just the still sense of my own being. And so that's why, meditation techniques, I think, are useful, because they quieten the mind down. And then we can begin to see, oh, this is what I mean by I. So that's the real purpose of the question, not who are you in the world, but what is the word I pointing to in yourself, in your own being? And that I think is a really fundamental thing, because firstly, it takes us out of the ego mind. Where it's like, oh yes, here I am, and there's the ego mind doing its job, but here I am, and this is always there. And also, it's bringing us back to what we really want. This sense of I am is actually always at peace in itself.
Yeah. Thinking
May not be at peace, but the sense of I am is always at peace in itself. And so when we come back to that, that's why there's this feeling of, firstly a sense of, yes, ease, yes. But also a sense of home. It's like, I've come home again. I've been out in the world doing all this stuff, and we come home to ourselves. And there's that sense of safety in it. Here I am. And I find it interesting that, when people have near-death experiences, which I've been absolutely fascinated by, there's always, there's a few common sort of correlates. The experiences can be quite different, but there's nearly always this sense of being at peace, and a sense of love. Being loved or opening to love, those two characteristics, are very strong things. And what my sort of hypothesis is, this is just a way of thinking about it, is when you get close to death, the near-death experience, you're drowning or something's happened, whatever it is, you're in a car accident, whatever it is, the ego's job is done. It's like it can't keep you safe anymore. You're going to die. And so the ego doesn't have a job to do anymore. And suddenly you're tasting how it is to be free of the ego mind. And when you're free of the ego mind, then you're at peace. When the ego mind is what gets in the way of real love, because the ego mind sees, love as something to get or whatever it is. It obscures the fact that our very nature is loving. And that's why I think, people who come back from near-death experiences come back with a sense of freedom. They're not concerned about death anymore. It's like, I got to the doors of death and it was okay. And they come back losing their fear of death. But I think that's because the ego mind has dropped away at that stage, and we're experiencing how it is. In fact, in Indian thought,
Yeah.
They talk about this experience of the pure self as samadhi. Samadhi is the still mind when you've come back to your true nature, your true self. And then death, they call maha samadhi, the great samadhi. So, and they say, practicing meditation is in a way preparing you for the great samadhi, when that identity drops away. But I think that's what we fear about death, is that fear of losing that identity, the ego identity.
This subject, well, it's a very important subject in my life, and that is why I created this death positive movement, because I have been working with people who are at grief and loss for 16 years now. And everybody told me before in my life that death was this dark and very sad and very heavy experience. And what I have experienced working with people in grief and with serious illness is that they are experiencing a very hard moment in their life, maybe the hardest one. They are very vulnerable, but they are also very open. Death and the awareness of death, as you told, wiped off all these masks and all this identity stuff.
Yeah.
And they sit in front of me. We don't know each other. Maybe we think very different in our lives. We have different religions or different politics thinkings or anything of those things that today are separating the humanity.
Yeah.
And they come here, they sit down, and immediately we can have a conversation that I cannot have with any other human being in any other moment. It's like they are with their heart so open, and we are connecting with our souls, not with our minds. So that is why this death subject and the letting go and the
Right.
ego is so important to me, and that is the reason why I wanted to have you here.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful what you're doing. I really honor that. That's really, really good. Thank you for doing that to people. So helpful. And it sounds like
I help them, but they help me. It's
yes.
like
Yes,
for both sides.
and it sounds like what you're doing in a way is what we're talking about is just letting go, is letting in and letting be. They're able to see it for what it is, talk about it. They would let in their fears, whatever it is, or what's happening, their tightness in the body, just allowing to let it in, and you're helping them do that and letting it be. And that's bound to lead to a feeling easier about it. Yeah. And just talking, whatever you do in some way or another, you're allowing them to be with it rather than resisting it.
I have found in death the only thing in this crazy world that where we are always seeking something that separates us from each other. Death is the only thing that unites us, and where that shows us that we are all in the same boat, and we can be at service for each other, as you told before. Yeah,
good.
So well, we don't have much time, but I want to, many times people tell me, yeah, you talk about this letting go and very beautiful stuff, but for example, we have many people in our community that has lost their sons, or that have suffered a very traumatic experience, someone who has killed my brother, or I have suffered in a very bad dictatorship. Somebody kidnapped my father and make him disappear.
Yeah.
How can we be at peace with that? How can we let go of that kind of suffering, that kind of pain?
And those are probably some of the most intense experiences we can have. That loss of a loved one, the
Most
grief.
people tell me, how can you tell me I have to let go? What do you
Right.
know about it?
Exactly. And I don't think, again, it's not about getting rid of it. Grief is a natural process. And, we see it in animals. We see animals grieve. So it's a natural process. It's not about getting rid of it, letting go of it. It's about how can we move through that process. And so I would say, the same thing, if you're deep in grief, to actually open up to it rather than saying, God, this is awful, this is horrible, to actually, do the opposite and open up, how's it feel in my body? I really, always encourage people to go to the body first. There's so much wisdom, knowledge in the body that is, because we don't go there so much, we tend to go to our minds.
Yeah. When the body wants to speak, we just have a pill or something to quiet the body.
Exactly. And we get caught up in our heads. So I would suggest with that to go to your body and actually explore all that's going on in your body connected with the grief. That thing, I talked about earlier, just like, what else is going on? Is there something else I haven't noticed? Just that sort of open inquiry. What else is going on here? So you become familiar with the whole process that's going on in the body. And I think that is a first step to, I would just say, softening its impact. It's not getting rid of the grief, but it's beginning to almost to let it in and really feel what's there. And I think the body here is much more important than the mind, because this is a deep, deep organic thing that's happening. And then, as people say, there's different stages of it. There's the actual, there's the anger that's there. There's the sadness that's there. There's the, wishing it wouldn't happen sort of thing. All these things are there and mixed up. But and they say that, the end of grieving is some sort of acceptance. But to get there, I think we need to not resist the grieving, not resist it, but find ways to just open up to it. Hard as that may seem at the beginning, if I really let this in, I'm just going to feel so bad, or just going to be a complete mess. But I would advise people is find some way, safe way of beginning to explore what's going on. It's not the solution to it. It's not going to make it go away, but it's going to start.
It's a starting point. Yeah.
And it's going to start making it easier to be with. And I think that's the thing. It makes it easier to be with. It's, but the pain of grief is very, very real. And it should be listened to. Whatever the body's saying to us, it's wanting attention. I always say any discomfort, pain of any sort, physical, emotional, is the body saying, give me attention. I want attention, please. So do that. Instead of trying to take our attention away from it, to get rid of it, actually give it attention. Yeah.
Also, I get this question: what is the difference between letting go and acceptance and resignation?
Okay, interesting. I would say letting go leads towards acceptance, because letting go of our, so letting go leads towards acceptance. Resignation isn't letting go. Resignation is like still putting up with the attachment. It's like say, okay, this is going to be there. So it's not letting go. It's another way of sort of dealing with the pain.
Because many people understand acceptance like I have to resignate about a situation or something.
No. And I mean, this is a general thing, not just with death, but a misunderstanding of what acceptance means. Acceptance, in my view, is not accepting the situation, it's accepting our experience in the moment. And so, there's a lot in the world we don't want to accept, apart as well as grieving, etc. But social injustice, homelessness, whatever it is. There's many things that we should not accept. The acceptance is accepting our experience in the moment. Whether that's, frustration, anger, grief, whatever it is, accepting the experience, but it's not resigning myself to the situation. So resignation is people think it means accepting the situation. It doesn't mean accepting the situation, but accepting it. What we're talking about is accepting our experience in the moment. And that leads to a broader acceptance in a wider sense. Yeah. But to me, they're very different. And that's the way, to think of it as acceptance is in the moment. Resignation is more in terms of time and things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So before we say goodbye, can you give me some thoughts about forgiveness, about guilt, and about love? What are those words for you?
How long have we got?
We don't have a time limit.
Right. So say those things again.
It's up to you. Forgiveness, guilt, and love.
Forgiveness, guilt, and love. Forgiveness, I think we touched upon a bit. If you go back to, the Greek, the Bible, the Greek word that's there for forgiveness is the word aphesis, which actually means to physically let go. If you're letting go of holding something, it's about letting go. So forgiveness, we usually think of forgiveness as you did wrong, but I'm not going to punish you this time. I forgive you. I forgive you your sins. I forgive you.
This religious view of forgiveness. Yeah.
But actually, forgiveness, as I see it, is something we do in ourselves, for ourselves. We're letting go of our judgments. I mean, when we hold a judgment against somebody, the only person we're hurting is ourselves. The other person may not even know we're judging them or some way. So forgiveness is about letting go of the judgment. And again, the same thing, seeing what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body. So when we begin to release.
But it's something we do for us.
We do for us. We do for us. The other person doesn't.
There's the key.
Yeah. The other person may, probably didn't even know we were judging them. And if we forgive them, they don't even know we've forgiven them. It's not for the other person. We may think it is. No, it's for us, because we then feel better. When we let go of the grievance and let go of the judgment, it's making us feel bad for days, months. Something goes wrong. We can judge a person. Even years later, we could still be holding that judgment or grievance. And all it's doing is making us upset in some way. It's creating tension. It's taking us away from living life. So forgiveness is about letting go of the grievance, judgment. And as we said, one way to do this is to put yourself in the other person's shoes and begin to see what might have been going on for them. How might they have been seeing you? What do they want from me? And when we begin to do that, that again leads us to letting go of the judgment. So that's how I see forgiveness. Love. We use the word love in, so many different ways. Romantic love. I love ice cream, whatever it is, which means I'm attached to ice cream for getting my satisfaction. Even romantic love can be, that sort of thing. This is the perfect person. This is the person, I like the way you look. I like your sense of humor. I like what you're interested in, all this stuff. I like the way you care for me. You are going to make my life better. You are the object in the way that's going to make my life better, make me feel happy. So that is love, but that's what's called conditional love. If all those
do you think that is love?
Is
it love for you? I want to know that, because
right.
Yeah.
it's hard because there's definitely that, there's love, there's that feeling in the heart, that's definitely there. But it's what's often called conditional love. The love is there, but it's conditional upon the person. Unconditional love is love that is just there in your heart, and it's not directed towards anything. And I think this, again, is something that comes when we get more in touch with our essential being, at the I am. It's a quality of peace that's there, but also it's a quality that I call lovingness. It's not loving anything, but there's just a lovingness. And so you feel filled with love. You feel filled with love, or just you feel that lovingness, but it's not dependent upon anything in the world. And that, I think, again, is part of our natural state. And so in a way, what happens when we, quote, fall in love, here's a person, I feel safe, etc. They allow me to drop back into my own lovingness. And so I sometimes rephrase it, we don't so much fall in love with another, but this other person allows us to fall back into our love in ourselves. So, and that's not to, in no way do I want to, diminish the power and the value of human love, even conditional love. What is it?
On the contrary, I think.
It's part of what we are. It's part of what, right back in childhood, it's what kept us alive when we were very young. It's so, so important. But the point is that there's this unconditional state of love, which I think is, again, what all the traditions are talking about, which is our own innate being. And so the more we can let go of the ego mind telling us what to do to feel love, we just drop back into ourselves and connect with that innate lovingness. Yeah.
And the last one, guilt.
Guilt. Guilt is that there's a difference between guilt and shame. They're different. Shame is to do with almost like being rejected from the group. It's like feeling I've done something awful and I'm going to be rejected. People are not going to like me. I need to go and hide away, whatever it is. Guilt is more that feeling I have done something wrong, that I made a mistake or whatever it is, that in a way, I think it's attached to two things. It's one, obviously, you're feeling guilty about how other people are seeing you. There's that side of it. And so in terms of how we get on in the world, we're feeling we've made a mistake, other people aren't going to respect us or like us so much. But also there's that side of, I think what we see behind guilt is, again, the ego mind in operation in a way that I made a mistake. Deep down, all along, I was looking for happiness. That's what I was looking for. And I think we all always do the best we can.
Yeah.
Within our given limitations, within how we're feeling that day. I had a sleepless night. I'm going to make different decisions, whatever it is. We all do the best we can in the moment. And so guilt is like stepping back and saying, I could have done better. I could have done better. But in a way, it's about forgiving. Hang on, I'm going to sneeze. Nope. It may come back. Yes, there it goes. In a way, it's about forgiving ourselves. And just as we, when we forgive another person, we're saying, okay, I understand what was going on, etc. with you. With guilt, I see the way out of guilt is to actually forgive ourselves. Okay, whatever it was, I was doing the best I can. Guilt is a judgment about ourselves. And so it's about letting go of that judgment of ourselves, because guilt just makes us feel bad again. So it's really about forgiving ourselves.
Yeah, they are very related.
Yeah.
Thank you. So where can the people in our community find about your teachings, about your books? Do you have a web page? Please tell them how they can know more about you.
The basic place is my webpage, which is peterrussell.com, but with 2 L's on Russell, not the European French way with 1 L. So Peter Russell. And I've got probably 400 pages there of lots of things I've written over the years. Some of my books are there online.
Can they buy the books, or they
you can buy that. You can buy the books there as well.
Yeah.
Or there's lots of meditations. There's audios of many talks I've done, and videos, lots of videos. And you can go just to YouTube and put in my name, and you'll find a lot of videos there by me.
Great.
But the website is the starting point, and hopefully it's easily navigable. You can find your way around and find, yes, everything about me. And my new book is featured there.
What's the name?
Letting Go of
Nothing.
Letting Go of Nothing, with the subtitle, Relax Your Mind and Discover the Wonder of Your True Nature. And that isn't available on the website at the moment, but it's available. I don't know when it's going to be available in Chile, because it has to get out from America, shipped out and things. It's only been published here 2 weeks.
Is there a possibility to translate your books?
Yes.
Do you have any of your books already translated to Spanish, or none of them?
I do.
Yeah?
Yes. I'm forgetting which one. Several of them. I think most of the past ones have been. If you look at the books, the individual books on my website, it should say what language they've been translated into. But I know Spanish has been, one of the languages my books have often been translated into.
Okay.
So I think most of them, but again, the titles will be a little bit strange, but a bit of research you should find. And I'm sure, the publishers will be, selling this to some South American Spanish speaking publisher, I'm sure, in time. But then, for the moment, if your English is good enough to read,
yeah,
it should be, available online in Amazon or other places in Chile pretty soon. Once the stock gets to the warehouse. I know there's been hold-ups because of the whole global supply chain slowdown. Yeah.
So thank you very much again. I hope people will watch this podcast and they can learn something new, a new positive view about this letting go and apply it on their lives and on their grief processes. So thank you very much again, and it was a really pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I'm sorry for my English, but I hope you understood.
Oh, yes. No, your English is fine. Little accent, but fine.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay, and you.